The clock on my nightstand said 3014 a.m. when my phone lit up. I almost didn't look. At 63, I sleep late, always have, and I'd learned to ignore the blue glow. Spam calls. Robocalls. Sometimes my neighbor Harold drunk dialing the wrong number. I rolled over, pulled the blanket up, and closed my eyes. Then it buzzed again. I reached for it without thinking. The way you do when your body is still half asleep, but something in your gut has already woken up. The number on the screen had no name attached to it, but I knew the area code. 541, Oregon. That was where my son had been living when he disappeared. I sat up so fast the room tilted. My son Owen had been gone for 2 years, 3 months, and 11 days. I know that because I counted every single one of them. He didn't die. That was the thing people never understood. The thing that made grief so complicated I didn't have a word for it. He just stopped. No accident, no illness, no goodbye. One Tuesday in September he was alive and calling me on Sunday afternoons like he always did. The next Tuesday he wasn't. His phone disconnected. His apartment empty. His landlord said he'd left in the night, left furniture and everything, just took a bag and walked out. The police looked. For about 6 weeks they looked. Then they filed it as a voluntary disappearance. An adult who chose to leave and moved on. I understood it legally. I didn't understand it as his father. Owen was 31 when he vanished. He was a quiet kid who liked woodworking and bad action movies and called me every Sunday at 2 o'clock without fail. He had a laugh that came from somewhere deep in his chest. He had my wife's eyes, and she passed when he was 19, so those eyes meant something to me. I stared at that Oregon area code for 3 full seconds. Then I answered. The line was silent for a moment. Just breathing. Soft. A little ragged, like someone who'd been crying or running or both. Dad. One word. That's all it took to undo 2 years of trying to be okay. I didn't speak. I couldn't. My throat locked up completely, and I sat there in the dark of my bedroom in Maplewood, New Jersey, holding the phone against my ear like if I pressed hard enough he wouldn't disappear again. Dad, are you there? Owen? My voice came out wrong. Cracked, too high. I cleared my throat. Owen, where are you? Are you hurt? A pause. Then, I can't tell you where I am right now. I'm sorry. I just needed to hear your voice. I needed to know where I am right now. I'm sorry. I just needed to hear your voice. I needed to know you're okay. I'm okay. Son, what is going on? Do you know what the last 2 years have been like? Do you have any idea? I know, Dad. I'm so sorry. Where have you been? Another pause, longer this time. I could hear something in the background. Wind, maybe. Or traffic, far away. He was outside somewhere. Or near an open window. I can't explain everything right now, he said, and his voice had dropped lower, the way it used to when he was telling me something he didn't want anyone else to hear. But I need you to do something for me, and I need you to do it without telling anyone. Not your neighbor, not anyone from the church, nobody. Can you do that? I should have asked more questions. Any reasonable person would have. Yes, I said. Whatever you need. Go to your garage, behind the old workbench, on the left side. There's a wooden panel that doesn't sit flush. I put something there the last time I visited. 2 years before I left. I was going to tell you about it when things settled down, but they never settled down, and then I had to go, and He stopped, took a breath. Just go look. And Dad? Don't call this number back. I'll call you again when I can. The line went dead. I sat in the dark for a full minute. Then I put on my slippers and went to the garage. The last time Owen visited was Thanksgiving, 2.5 years before he disappeared. He'd driven up from Oregon, spent 4 days, helped me reseal the driveway and ate 3 plates of turkey and fell asleep on the couch watching football. Regular visit. Nothing strange about it, nothing I'd flagged in memory, but I stood in front of that workbench and thought about that visit differently now. The panel he mentioned. I found it in 30 seconds. Left side bottom, plywood slightly bowed at one corner. I'd always assumed it was just old wood settling. I got a flathead screwdriver from the pegboard, pried the corner up, and the whole panel swung out on a small hinge Owen had installed himself. Behind it was a waterproof zip bag, the kind hikers use. Inside the bag was a USB drive, a folded letter, and a photograph. I took everything to the kitchen table and sat under the light. The photograph first. It was Owen, maybe 28 or 29 in the picture, standing with a man I didn't recognize. Big guy, wide shoulders, the kind of smile that's all teeth and no warmth. On the back, in Owen's handwriting, "This is Brendan Scholl. If something happens to me, start here." Then the letter. I'm going to tell you what was in it, because you deserve to understand why a man who loved his father disappeared without a word. Owen had met Brendan Scholl at a job, a construction management company in Portland. Owen was doing finished carpentry as a contractor. Brendan was the project manager. They became friends, or what Owen believed was friendship. In the letter, Owen explained it carefully, the way he always did things, measured, thorough. Brendan had approached him about a side business, investment property. Brendan had the connections. Owen had the skills. They'd flip houses together and split the profit. Owen had trusted him. Of course he had. Brendan was charming and confident and always had an answer for everything. And Owen had grown up without a lot of that, being quiet himself. What Owen didn't know, what he found out 18 months later, was that Brendan had been using Owen's name and contractor's license on permits for work that was never done. Building inspections signed off on projects Owen had never touched. Money paid out to a subcontractor who didn't exist. When the state contractors board started investigating, Owen's name was on every piece of paper. Brendan's name was nowhere. Owen wrote, "I panicked, Dad. I know I shouldn't have. I should have called you first. But I looked at what he'd done, and I thought, I don't know what I thought. I thought no one would believe me. I thought my license would be revoked. I thought I might go to jail for something I didn't do, and I couldn't face that. I couldn't face having you look at me from across a courtroom." He'd left because he was afraid. Not of Brendan, not exactly, but of what Brendan had built around him like a cage made of paperwork, and of not being able to prove his way out of it. I set the letter down. Picked it up again. Read that last paragraph 3 more times. He thought I'd be ashamed of him. I sat at that kitchen table for a long time. Outside, the neighborhood was completely quiet. 4 in the morning in Maplewood, New Jersey, and the whole world was asleep, except for me and whatever this was. I didn't sleep after that. I made coffee, and I sat and I thought about Brendan Scholl. I don't have any special skills. I'm a retired high school history teacher. I spent 31 years explaining the causes of World War I to teenagers who mostly wanted it to be lunchtime. I don't know anything about contractor licensing fraud or white-collar crime or how any of that works, but I know how to research. That's the one thing teaching history gives you. You learn how to find things, how to follow a thread back to where it started. By 6 in the morning, I had Brendan Scholl's business address, his company registration with the Oregon Secretary of State, 3 LinkedIn profiles, and a court filing from 4 years ago in Multnomah County, a civil dispute with a former business partner. The former partner's name was Victor Lane. The case had been settled out of court. I wrote Victor Lane's name on a notepad. Owen called again 4 days later. Different number, still Oregon. "Did you find it?" he asked. "I found it," I said. "I read everything. Owen, listen to me. I need you to hear this." I steadied my voice. "I am not ashamed of you. Not for 1 second, not 1 moment. You understand me." He didn't say anything. I heard him exhale long and slow, the way you breathe out after holding something for a very long time. "You should have called me," I said, 2 years ago, the night you found out. "You should have called me and we would have figured it out together, the same way we figured everything out together after your mother died. That's what I'm here for. That's all I'm here for. That's all I'm here for." "I know," he said, very quiet. "But we're going to fix it now. I need you to trust me on something." I looked at Victor Lane's name on the notepad. "Do you know a man named Victor Lane?" A beat of silence. "He sued Brendan a few years back. Or tried to." "Why?" "Because I think he knows things. And I think you need a lawyer before you come home, so that when you walk back in, you walk back in clean." Owen didn't say anything for a moment. Then, You looked him up. I'm a history teacher, I said. We look things up. He laughed. It was short, just a breath really, but it was his laugh, that deep chest sound, and I had to press my free hand flat against the kitchen table to hold myself steady. Before we go any further, let me ask you something. Have you ever had a gut feeling about a person that everyone around you dismissed? That quiet instinct that said something is wrong with this one, even when you couldn't point to anything specific? I'd love to know. Leave it in the comments. Because what happened next was exactly that kind of thing. And I've thought about it a lot since. I called Victor Lane on a Tuesday. He picked up on the second ring, and when I explained who I was and why I was calling, he went quiet in a way that felt less like surprise and more like relief. I've been waiting for someone connected to Owen Calloway to call me for 2 years, he said. We talked for nearly 2 hours. Victor Lane was a general contractor out of Eugene who'd brought Brendan in as a project manager on a commercial renovation in 2019. Same thing happened. Permits filed under Victor's license for work that wasn't done. Money routed through a ghost subcontractor. Victor had sued. Brendan had settled, meaning Victor got some money, and Brendan got to avoid admitting anything on paper. The man is careful, Victor said. He never puts his own name on the dirty work. He finds someone else, someone with a clean license, someone who trusts him, and he uses them as a shield. My son, I said. Yes. And before your son, me, and I've heard there was someone before me, but I was never able to track down who. I asked Victor if he'd be willing to talk to a lawyer. He said he'd been wanting to for 3 years. He just never had a second victim to corroborate the pattern. Pattern. That was the word that changed everything, because 1 incident is a dispute, 2 incidents is a coincidence, 3 incidents is a pattern, and a pattern is something a prosecutor can work with. I found the attorney through Owen's union. He'd been a member of the Carpenters Union before everything fell apart, and it turned out the union had a legal referral service. The attorney's name was Petra Schilling, out of Portland, and she had 17 years of experience in contractor fraud and occupational licensing defense. When I explained the situation, including Victor Lane and the prior civil suit, she said something I needed to hear. If what you're describing is accurate, your son is a victim of license fraud, not a perpetrator. The question is documentation. The USB drive had documentation. Owen had been careful. In his frightened, methodical way, he'd saved contracts, emails, permit applications, payment records, everything. He'd put it all on that drive and hidden it in my garage because somewhere in the back of his mind, even while he was running, he'd understood that someday it would need to come out. He hadn't been reckless. He'd been terrified. There's a difference. Petra reviewed everything and called me back in 3 days. This is solid, she said. I want to talk to your son directly. Can you arrange that? I called Owen's latest number that night. There's someone who wants to talk to you, I said. Her name is Petra. She's a lawyer, and I think it might be time to come home. I want to tell you what it was like, waiting. Between that conversation and the morning Owen actually walked back through my front door, there were 6 more weeks. 6 weeks of phone calls, of documents submitted, of the state contractors board reopening their file, of Petra putting together a formal complaint with the DA's office in Multnomah County. 6 weeks of Owen hiding in a motel in Bend. He finally told me where he was. Once Petra got involved and things started moving, and me sending him money through an app on my phone because I couldn't figure out how to wire it any other way, and Harold from next door had to come over and show me how. I didn't tell anyone what was happening. Not Harold, not my sister Paulette in Phoenix, not the guys from my Thursday morning walking group. I'd promised Owen, and I kept it. What I did every night was go out to the garage and stand in front of that workbench. I don't know exactly why. It was where it had started, I suppose, where he'd reached back through time and left me something to hold on to. Standing there made me feel like the distance between us was smaller. 63 years old, and I was standing in a cold garage in my pajamas, just to feel close to my son. If that sounds foolish to you, then you've never spent 2 years not knowing if your child is alive. On a Thursday morning in March, I heard a car pull into the driveway. I was in the kitchen. I had the coffee on. I'd been up since 5 because I knew Petra had told me the night before, finally, that it was safe, that the formal process was in motion and Owen could come home without risk of being detained, that the case had shifted entirely onto Brendan Scholl's shoulders where it belonged. I heard the car door, then footsteps on the porch, then a knock on his own father's door. Because he wasn't sure, I think, whether he still had the right to just walk in. I opened the door. He looked older. Of course he did. 2 years does that. His hair was a little longer, a little more gray at the temples, and he'd lost weight he didn't have to lose. He was standing on my porch, with a duffel bag over one shoulder and his mother's eyes, and he looked at me the way he'd looked at me the night of her funeral, like he was waiting for me to tell him what to do next. I didn't tell him anything. I just stepped forward and put my arms around him. We stood there on the porch for a long time. Long enough that Harold definitely saw us from across the street and definitely had questions, which I answered about a week later over a beer. Long enough that I stopped counting the days. I should tell you what happened to Brendan Scholl, because I know that's what you're waiting for. The DA's office filed charges 8 weeks after Owen came home. Contractor license fraud, wire fraud, falsifying public documents. Victor Lane gave a deposition. Owen gave a deposition. There were records going back further than either of them. Petra found a third case, a woman named Sandra who'd worked with Brendan in Washington State before he moved to Oregon, and Sandra had kept her records too. And suddenly the pattern was undeniable. Brendan's attorney tried to make it about credibility. Owen had disappeared after all. Didn't that suggest guilt? Wasn't a man who ran away obviously hiding something? The jury didn't see it that way. I was in that courtroom the day the verdict came in. Owen sat next to me. He hadn't wanted to come. He was afraid, still the way a burn makes you afraid of heat long after it heals. I told him he needed to be there. Not for Brendan. For himself. So he could see it land. Guilty on 4 or 5 counts. The 5th was reduced. Brendan Scholl was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison in order to pay restitution to Owen, to Victor, and to Sandra. I'm told the restitution number was significant. I'm also told he'll likely serve less than 4 years. That part is harder to sit with, but I watched Owen's face when the verdict was read. I watched something leave him, some held breath he'd been keeping for over 2 years, and I thought, that's enough. That's what we came here for. Here's what I want to say to you, because I've had a lot of time to think about it, and I think it matters. My son ran because he thought I would see him differently if I knew. He thought the mess of what Brendan had done to his name and his license would somehow become his mess in my eyes. He thought being falsely implicated was the same as being guilty, as long as someone who mattered to him was watching. I don't know where he learned that. I've turned it over in my mind 100 times. I thought I'd made it clear, all his life, that he could come to me. That's what fathers are supposed to do. You make it clear, but sometimes the fear is louder than the message. Sometimes the shame of a thing, even a shame that isn't rightfully yours, gets so loud it drowns out everything you know about the people who love you. So if you're carrying something right now, something you're afraid to bring to the people who know you, something that feels too tangled, too embarrassing, too far gone to explain, I want you to hear this from a 63-year-old man who stood in a cold garage in his pajamas for 6 weeks. Go make the call. Whatever it costs you to make it, the silence costs more. I lost 2 years with my son, 2 years of Sunday phone calls, 2 years of bad action movies, 2 years of that laugh. I'm not going to get those back. Owen knows that, and I know he carries it. But he's sitting in my living room right now, fixing a drawer that's been stuck since 2019, and I can hear him humming something I don't recognize, and I think that's going to have to be enough. It mostly is. I've thought a lot about what made all of this possible. Not the legal outcome. That part had its own momentum once Petra got involved. I mean, what made it possible for Owen to come home at all. And every time I trace it back, I end up at the same place. He kept records. That might sound small. It isn't. When Owen realized what Brendan had done to him, his first instinct was to run. I understand that. Fear does that to a person. It narrows everything down to the single most immediate exit. But even while he was running, some quieter part of him was thinking clearly enough to save the emails, copy the permits, put everything on a drive and hide it somewhere safe. He was scared out of his mind, and he still didn't throw the evidence away. That's not luck. That's character showing up even when the person it belongs to doesn't fully trust it. Brendan Scholl was counting on the opposite. He'd built his whole operation on the assumption that the people he used would be too ashamed or too frightened to document anything. That's how men like him survive for as long as they do. They rely on their victim's silence the way the rest of us rely on oxygen. The moment Owen's records met Victor Lane's records, met Sandra's records, the whole structure collapsed. Not because some outside force came in and dismantled it, because three people, independently, had each decided that what happened to them was worth remembering accurately. There's something important in that. The truth doesn't disappear just because someone buries it. It waits, and the people who take the time to write things down, to keep the paperwork, to preserve what actually happened, even when they're not sure it will ever matter. Those people give the truth somewhere to live until the right moment arrives. I also think about what I almost did wrong. When Owen first called at 3 a.m., my instinct was to demand answers. Where are you? What happened? Why didn't you call? All the questions a frightened father asks when what he actually means is, I've been sick with worry and I need you to make that stop right now. I almost made it about my 2 years instead of his. I'm glad I caught myself. I'm glad the first real thing I said to him was that I wasn't ashamed. Not because it was the kind thing to say, though it was, but because it was the only thing that mattered. The shame Owen was carrying wasn't even his. Brendan had handed it to him like a piece of luggage and walked away. And Owen had been hauling it alone for over 2 years because he was afraid that if I saw it, I'd think it was his. That's what isolation does. It lets borrowed shame feel like original sin. What I know now, at 63, is that the people who love you cannot help you carry what they don't know you're holding. It sounds obvious. It isn't when you're in the middle of it. When you're in the middle of it, silence feels like protection. It feels like you're sparing them. What you're actually doing is leaving them on the other side of a wall with no door, wondering what they did wrong. Owen is not a cautious man by nature. He's actually fairly stubborn and independent, traits I recognize because I gave them to him. So when I say it took real courage for him to make that call at 3 a.m., I mean it. He'd spent 2 years convincing himself that coming back was impossible. Making that call meant admitting the isolation had been a mistake. That's one of the hardest things a person can do. Decide that being found is worth the risk of being seen. I don't know what you're carrying right now. I don't know what feels too tangled to explain or too far gone to fix. But I know what I know, which is this. The mess of a thing very rarely looks the same to the people who love you as it looks to you. Owen thought he was handing me a disaster. What he actually handed me was my son. Make the call. Write it down. Don't throw the evidence away. The truth is patient. So are the people who are waiting for you to come home.